Thank you. One of the aims of this research project is to study the lived experience of social frontiers and their impacts on social mobility. We shall also see that social mobility is highly related to integration. Successful integration is linked to the possibility of social mobility to move up the socioeconomic ladder in spite of your parents' background. We focus on outcomes related to employment, education, and housing. And my task is to give you a short presentation of the Norwegian context. We know that social mobility and integration are societal challenges. So what about the gaps in the research literature? In particular, we do not even know if there exist social frontiers in Norway, and there is no agreement regarding what close geographical contexts mean for social mobility. On the other hand, we know that institutional arrangements, different welfare systems, different structure of housing and labor markets, and different numbers and composition of immigrants will have different impacts of social frontiers. But we do not know how these institutional or market arrangements matter, and these issues have only scarcely been studied in longer time span which our data enables. So this is an important knowledge gap that we aim to fill. In our project, this issue will be studied across 3 countries. The issue is also relevant across municipalities within Norway. One reason is high degree of local autonomy regarding practical integrational efforts. Norway is a small open economy with a comprehensive welfare state, and the population is 5.3 million. In general, it is a country with low level of inequality and high level of social mobility, and this is illustrated by the Great Gatsby curve. Low value of the Gini index shows low level of inequality. The Gini today is 0.25, but it has increased somewhat in later years. Immigration is one important reason for increasing income disparities. Immigration from poor countries in particular plays a role here according to Statistics Norway. The intergenerational income elasticity is low in Norway, which shows that parents' income determines the children's income to a relatively small extent. Here's just a slide showing how we define immigrants. Today, the immigrant population is 14.7. This is higher than the average in the OECD. In 2000, however, the number of immigrants to Norway were below the OECD average, so there has been an increase in the number of immigrants in the last decades. Norway used to be a poor country with one of the world's highest immigration rates. The first immigrants came from the Nordic countries in the 1950s. Thereafter, a large proportion of immigrants from other countries has arrived. Today, Norway is a modern society with a diverse immigrant population. So where do the immigrants come from? We see that 48% come from Europe and 47% come from Africa and Asia together. And more than half of Norway's immigrants originate from the non-OECD countries. More detailed, by far the largest immigrant group in Norway is the Polish. 3 out of 4 of these are labor immigrants. They have a short stay time and a high share live in sparsely populated areas, and they are not living very segregated. Their employment level is very high, even higher than the Norwegians. For the Norwegians. Many immigrants also come from Pakistan, and they have stayed for more than 20 years. The majority has arrived through family reunification. In Oslo, they are among the most segregated. Unemployment rate for these immigrants are higher than for the population in general, and there is a significant gender gap in employment. For what reasons do the immigrants come to Norway? Norway has a relatively high proportion of labor immigrants. We also see that the number arriving due to family reunion has been increasing, and in 2016 this was the main reason for arrival to Norway. This is problematic given inter alia the employment rates for family members tend to be low. But what about the Norwegian housing market? Norway is a land of homeowners, and the ownership rate is also high among immigrants, although it varies by country of origin and stay time. The renting sector is small and makes up 20% only, and finally social housing is also small. It is the responsibility of the local municipality, and in Oslo, for instance, social housing is clustered in some areas which has been claimed will not foster integration. Residential areas in Norway are highly homogeneous and compared to an international standard, and also urban challenges are not severe in comparison to international situation. However, there are challenges in many cities, also the second largest one. But most notably in Oslo, residential areas have been deteriorating, and extremely high housing prices lead to a concentration of low-income households, and hence a large proportion of the immigrants live in the most vulnerable areas. Finally, it should be noticed that comprehensive area-based initiatives are used. The programs are directed towards all people living in these types of neighborhoods, not immigrants in particular, although children with immigrant background are overrepresented in these areas. So where do the immigrants live? The settlements policy in Norway have secured that immigrants are scattered all over the country. So we have generous subsidies, so immigrants and refugees are highly welcomed in the municipality with declining and aging population, among other things. But as mentioned, a large proportion of immigrants live in Oslo and the other larger cities, but the settlement patterns in these cities vary. But Oslo has probably the most segregated structure. And on this map, you will see that there is a high degree of segregation in Oslo, and the clustering of immigrants has increased in eastern and southern parts of the cities over time. So what is the integration policy in Norway? In contrast to the UK, Norway used to be a homogeneous society with a largely white Christian population. Until the 1970s, integration was not an issue. Most migrants came from the Nordic countries. Currently, intra-EEA migration and high rates of immigration from third countries leaves integration policy an important issue. Norway's modern migration policy is based on the idea that the welfare state has limited resources. Preservation of the welfare state is one central aim of the Norwegian integration policy. So high in-migration of people with few possibility for self-sufficiency is hence viewed as a threat to the Norwegian welfare state. In this way, the welfare model is both a resource and a threat to integration. Resource-wise, it provides a low level of inequality. The model is, however, vulnerable in case of high immigration of adult people without qualification. This principle should be viewed together with the fact that all admitted immigrants have equal legal and practical opportunities as for the majority. In line with the British system, integration in Norway has been successful if unreasonable and not self-chosen differences between majority and minority diminish over time and between generations. So here is the link between integration and social mobility. Well, have we succeeded with our integration policy? Here we will only focus on some traditional measures of integration. On average, employment rates for immigrants are lower than for the majority. However, for the overall population, the employment rates are high, also among women. So labor force participation gap is especially large between native and immigrant women. The labor market structure is special in Norway. We have a strong trade union organization. We have a compressed wage structure with high entry-level wages. We also have few low-skill, low-wage jobs, which makes it difficult to enter the labor market for people with low or unknown productivity. Parallel to this, we have a comprehensive welfare state which provides generous benefits in case of unemployment, disability, etc. And research have documented that over time, labor migrants from poor countries show diminishing employment rates and increased disability rates. This is a problem for the welfare state and for integration, and it is contrast to the situation, for instance, in Sweden. We do not have the time to go into details about education, but some characteristics could be mentioned. Education is an important part of the welfare state and is a central policy effort to obtain integration. It is provided for mainly free of charge. A high proportion of second-generation immigrants take higher education. On average, their immigrant parents have little or lower education. At the upper secondary level, first and second generation boys have high dropout rates, so these boys is a clear vulnerable group in our country. So as a summary, educational attainment vary mainly by gender and whether one is a first generation or second generation immigrant. Results on employment vary by gender, country background and reasons for immigration. Our welfare models secure low degree of inequality, but have documented negative incentive structures for labor market participation of immigrants in the long run. So what is the knowledge gap in this type of setting? Do we have social frontiers in Norway? And if so, how does this impact education and employment attainment of immigrants living in these areas? Is something to be studied. And what is the importance of using large-scale longitudinal Norwegian data is also a novelty in this respect. It should also be noted that unregulated housing markets enables a study of house price impacts of social frontiers. However, more on research issues will follow in the next Swedish presentation. Thank you so much for your attention.